If you can tell a story visually, you can reach people across cultures, different languages, and sometimes even short attention spans. I'm Brendan Davis. I'm the filmmaker behind The Unwinding, and this is part one of a three-part series called Script to Screen. And in this series, we're going to look at The Unwinding specifically across three different areas. The visual language, we'll talk about the illusion of this film, and the reveal, how that was seeded in part three. And this kind of context as a filmmaker is something that you might find interesting beyond just this movie, but it might help change the way you look at other film and TV shows as well. So I hope you'll stick around and join me for this exploration. So let me tell you who this is for very specifically. I'm primarily making this for fans who want to go deeper into the film. I really appreciate the great response, and I want to continue to share things that might enhance your enjoyment of it in retrospect. Secondly, I'm sharing this for people who are just curious about how a script becomes a film. And as you see, I'll be showing you the actual script as well as the corresponding scenes that I'm referring to, and you can see what it looks like on the page and then how we translated that onto the stage or the screen and location in this case. But I'm also making it for both film students and fellow filmmakers who are curious about some of the more craft-specific details, how we did certain things, why we did certain things a certain way, and I'm sure you have a better idea if you're a filmmaker, just like a lot of the viewers have had suggestions. Why didn't you do this or that or the other thing? I'll talk about that throughout this series as much as I can, but I really encourage a deeper craft discussion in the comments below, as well as comments from a film fan. And I'll do my best to engage as much as possible. I'm excited to hopefully have that conversation, especially with filmmakers or film fans who are really passionate about details of certain things. Now, before we launch into it, two last quick notes. First of all, is that a small percentage of comments, but enough that I want to say something about it now, have mentioned that they didn't get it, they didn't understand something, and it was surprising to me that even on my director's commentary video, where I took half an hour and detailed at a high level all the things that I thought were essential, some people still miss some things, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I would say to bear in mind that this was made as a film. This is a video that is on YouTube, but it's not a YouTube video. This is a film, and it was originally intended to screen on movie screens at film festivals, which is what it did. And of course, nowadays, all of us, including me, though not for film so much, but for other kinds of content, we watch on either a small screen, on a mobile phone or maybe an iPad, or, sometimes people watch where they're distracted. It's a second screen going on. Maybe they have something they're following on the big TV, and then this is on a phone. That's fine, consume it and enjoy it how you do. But I think and suspect that a majority of the people who kind of didn't get it, frankly, probably fall into one of those two categories. And I would say that the other aspect of this is that some people just aren't used to watching this kind of a film. Let me say this without trying to sound pretentious, because I'm really not about this, but this is what's considered an art film. It is designed intentionally to be assembled by the viewer in your own head, not explained with exposition, where everything is said via text. And my professional intention with the film specifically, the emotional reasons I made the film, I've discussed in some detail in other videos, but professionally, I love dialogue, and I've had good responses to some of my dialogue in other scripts. I'm pretty decent at writing dialogue, but one of my goals professionally with this project was to prove that I could tell a story visually, and I wanted something that really relied on the images and the choices that were very intentional on screen to carry a lot of meaning, even with minimal or no speech. And that's something that's important to me professionally, and it's a demonstration of the way I would approach the feature version of this film, and it's important that I am able to show that to potential partners on said film to help make that a reality. So the way I decided to approach doing this for you is to play the film in this window, and then you can see me talking here for what that's worth. But I'll have the script, as I made it as big as I could here in the background, and I will show you the piece of the script that corresponds to the scenes that are currently playing. and I will talk over it as need be. I will also pause the film occasionally so that I can say something and not be competing with the dialogue. But without further ado, let's play the film. Shout out to my friend Stan, who financed this endeavor for us. So we're establishing exterior South London, and we're about to meet David, mid-60s but looks older. You see I had the broken down wheelie shopping cart as part of this from the beginning. And this score that I did, I wanted something that was, sort of ominous and foreboding, and set the tone, I know that seems sort of Captain Obvious here for me to say that, but that's the purpose. So right away, you'll notice that there are a few small changes from the actual text of the script to what we were able to shoot once we got a location. The script says that he lets himself into the entry hallway, and then we see stain paint and peeling wallpaper. And in reality, the entryway to that apartment, and that entry was just to that one apartment, but it was a multi-floor walk-up, and we couldn't really connect the two things visually. This was written in the abstract before I had a location. And I won't flag every detail like that, but this is a general comment that location reality often dictates what you have to do in terms of production. David closes the door, latches the deadbolt behind him, heads into the kitchen of a small apartment. We didn't have a door with a deadbolt in this location upstairs where the actual living room is, so we skipped that beat. So he unpacks his meager groceries on the counter, a markdown loaf of bread, some bargain butter, and a 4-pack of toilet paper. All meant to show that, he's living pretty lean. He's basically pretty poor. Now the script, from the looks of his sad little place, he can't afford much more than those groceries. The home is a time capsule with faded memories on the walls. Photos scattered around reveal a younger, figures-looking David with a beautiful Chinese woman and happier times. And I originally had the idea to have a bunch of photos of he and May in these locations. And I worked to assemble some things in Photoshop. But ultimately, when I found this location, we realized that we had that shrine area. I had intended to have a wall that was really decorated with lots of photos showing a rich, detailed life with his deceased wife, May, and I was going to Photoshop age-appropriate photos of the actor Kevin, along with photos of my actress friend Lee Chen, who is kind enough to be May, and if we make the feature, she's May, and she's going to be in the film a lot, so you'll get to know Lee. I saw that they had that little nook that we turned into the shrine for May. The actual residence of the apartment had, books and all kinds of things in there, and it was kind of a catch-all space. But I thought that this was a real opportunity. Producer Roger King did all of the location scouting while I was up in the northeast of England in a very tiny village with my wife Susie. We spent about a month and a half up there on our extended honeymoon before we went down to London for a week and we made this film. And my cinematographer, Naeem Sarafi, was still in Los Angeles. So Roger was scouting locations and sending me photos and videos of places. When we saw that nook, it was full of books and it was a kind of a catch-all space for the different roommates in this apartment. And, some of them had their keys sitting there. And I thought, that's a perfect place to build a little shrine. One of Roger's photos, there was actually a little light up in there, and Naeem tweaked it a little bit. He put a different bulb in and whatnot from when the light comes on later. But I thought that would be a perfect place. Instead of photos all over the walls, those are all photos of Lee Chen at different stages of her life as a young woman and throughout her life, a few different age periods. And then the photo that is right behind where I paused this, that's the wedding photo. You see it better in later shots. Once Lily enters, you see this shrine area a lot more. But that's a photo of Lee's actual wedding. Her husband's very tall. He's a lot taller than me or Kevin. But I photoshopped a period-appropriate shot of Kevin's head onto that image of Lee's actual husband, who's like a tall guy and kind of a beefy guy. But it sells. I use the other little objects of art there to kind of camouflage his size a little bit. And I think it works. It sells. That photo is on the wall in Susie and I's Beijing apartment. And I kind of wish I'd brought it to France. It would be fun to have that on the wall here. But I guess I could print another copy of it. But that actual one is back in Beijing. Ultimately, to me, being able to see that one wedding photo a little bit later more clearly, as well as the other photos of May, was really all I needed. Instead of having the wall covered, I thought it kind of worked better in this shrine. I was very happy to see that little bonus of this location, which was otherwise very difficult to shoot in, but it all worked out, so I'm grateful for it. Now again, details that are easy to miss on a small screen. The flashcards are right on top of that stack of Chinese language study books. There were a few people in the comments who said, "Oh, that's convenient, she brought flashcards." No, they're there from the beginning. But of course, the point of this scene, he's eating this meager toast and bread, and he's clearly depressed, very alone. Life going on outside. You can kind of tell it's a nice neighborhood from the shots outside the window. One last practical note of how things changed is that you see it says David sits, eats his meal, stares out the window, which we saw from the inside. But then there's a scene 3, exterior David's building, that we see him from the outside through the window, sitting by himself at one end of the table. And we just couldn't shoot that. The reality of a actual, I'll say film, of course it's still a video camera, but a camera for making films. The reality is that it's large, and in the case of the geometry of the building, how high up the window was, you had to get across the street, and we had a very long telephoto lens that is about this big and has mounting rods, and it's a big tripod to make this steady. And it required our cinematographer Naeem, as well as 2 camera assistants, to move this stuff outside for the exteriors that we did shoot. And there's a whole production cart that the camera equipment lives on there, batteries and lens case. And you don't just run outside and grab a shot and he doesn't hold this thing. I'd have to ask him how much that rig weighed with that giant telephoto lens on it. But we just couldn't practically shoot that shot. And I'll mention this here just as a little friendly reminder that, of course, you can pause the video at any point to read the entire piece of script that's on screen. I won't read every word to you, but I really wanted to show you how what's on the page was translated, and filmmaking-wise, what the point is. The point of this opening sequence was to really establish a man's emotional state and his economic condition, and all of this without dialogue, just using images and sound in the form of music or score. The next visual sequence is to establish the calendar, and specifically time itself, as a threat. So another practical change in the script, you see that it says David looks back to the kitchen, to the wall calendar, and he would be eating his toast and looking out the window, and then he look and see this, because when I had this in my head, I was imagining an apartment that's very common, like a small 1-bedroom apartment, where the kitchen and the dining area and the living area are all like this one open space. But the apartment we shot in, as I mentioned, was on multiple floors. The kitchen was a floor above the living area where we actually shot this. So instead, we had to have him enter into the kitchen, and you see him entering in other shots. But we established this calendar to mark the time. So although the way this was shot, we don't have him stopping chewing and swallowing hard and then going to the calendar. We do it in the way that you see it in the film, but realizes it's almost time. Well, that was essentially the note to the actor of what moment he's going to be playing. And, I think you would probably agree with me that Kevin West really conveyed a sense that it's almost time for something important to happen, and that's what's coming next. So next up is the belt scene, and the goal of this was to show his intent out of sensitivity for people who were really impacted by this scene deeper than I even intended. I won't replay that whole scene here, but what I will do is show you the script so you can see how it's written and how it translated pretty much directly to the film that you saw. Scene 5, interior David's bedroom, evening. Beside a double bed is the wardrobe closet. David stands in front of it and opens one of the doors reluctantly. A few nice women's dresses hang on the rod. A couple of boxes on the closet floor repeating labels show that this side of the closet contains belongings of his wife, May. And then he grabs a sturdy leather belt from nearby, makes a loop with it, brings a chair from his kitchen table, stands up on it inside his bedroom door, holding the belt. Well, the geography of the apartment didn't make that possible, and as you see throughout the film, you do see this cabinet here, this little bureau that has the wedding dishes in it later, and you see just kind of the top of some women's clothes. It's sort of a homeopathic version of being able to see that those are May's things, but we just didn't have the practical ability to shoot it this way. And what happens when you get on set is you see the location, you block the scenes out, you walk through it as the filmmaker and with your actors and your camera person, and you figure out how to best convey the point of it given the physical restraints of the space, and you hopefully have better ideas. I'm very happy with how this played out as it worked out, and I don't feel like we lost anything just because it wasn't done exactly as the script has indicated. And a quick reminder that you can pause the video at any point to read word for word any of this that you want to. For me, the most important line and what is the button on the scene is here toward the bottom where it says, "But today's not the day." And I feel, as many of you commented that you did, that Kevin's performance was just so amazing. And I feel like he really expressed everything we can imagine and more with his eyes. So the goal of the way that I approached this was to clearly show this ideation that he's having, but to not sensationalize it. And I feel, as I said, in every chance that I'm given, that I won the lottery with all my actors, but most especially with Kevin. And I think that a lot of you seem to agree with that. So I'm glad he was able to bring this to life in the way he did. So the next beat that we will look at is actually multiple beats throughout the film, and it's the central visual metaphor of the film, which is the dynamic between coffee versus tea. Now, the coffee versus tea dynamic is actually really important, and although it doesn't seem like a major plot point of the film, it is, of course, representing David's changing state of mind and emotion as the film progresses. So this is the first time that we'll actually look at several different scenes and pieces of the script and put it in this broader context for you. So the first time that we establish it is here. So we see him making his typical meal of toast, and he's going for his cheap instant coffee. But he sees this fancy teapot, and I don't actually read Chinese, I speak a little, but even if you don't read Chinese, you should understand that that's something Chinese, and you probably don't know that's a tea cake if you're not familiar with Chinese tea culture, but it's behind this special little teapot, and that is to set up what is to follow. So the next time that we see the coffee and tea dynamic in action is where we actually really begin to put together what they mean and what they represent. The instant coffee represents habit and survival and the concept of tomorrow, because every day he has his instant coffee. But the pu'er tea, the Chinese fancy pu'er tea, represents ritual, memory, the past. This is all tied to he and May's wedding anniversary and the life that they had together. So he throws it in the trash because he's not going to need it anymore. And if you didn't know what this is yet, which I assume most people don't, is we learned it's a cake of this very nice tea. He breaks off a chunk. And then a note about this is a very specific tea ritual. He's not pouring the tea out to not drink it. I talked about this in real time as the film played in the director's commentary video, which if you haven't seen it and somehow you've just discovered this straight away, that is linked up here so you can check that out. But specifically, one commenter had said something along the lines of, questioning why he just poured the tea out and didn't drink it. Well, he does drink it. This is a very specific tea ritual in China with this kind of tea. When you have these cakes of tea, your first move, the first pour of water, you use that to wash the tea, and then you pour that out, and you don't drink it. Some people have an elaborate tea set that has slots and a reservoir to catch tea, and you pour the end of a pot out in that, and it drains away. And a lot of people have little ceramic tea pets, like a little frog or a little rabbit or something. And that first pour of the tea, you give it to your tea pets. I think it's a very kind of cool ritual. But in this case, he's not pouring the tea out and not drinking it. He's simply following this ritual, which he has learned from his wife, which he knows very, very well. And an astute viewer who knows Chinese tea culture, or any Chinese person, knows exactly what he's doing. But it did go over the heads of a lot of my fellow Laowai, fellow foreigners from the Chinese perspective. You see in this script that it says he refills the pot a second time, puts the lid on, then takes it to the dining table. Now, in reality, as I said elsewhere, I ultimately didn't want to make a mini movie about a guy drinking tea. But there's a passage of time. We see here that he's changed into his suit, and now he's finally done with the tea, and he's dumping the grounds out. And of course, the instant coffee is covered in tea grounds because, again, he doesn't expect he's ever going to need that instant coffee again. And I fully intended to shoot more shots showing that he had a cup of tea by May's place setting, and then he was drinking his and passing the day, both in his morning, pajamas, and then throughout the day as the lighting changed, and then showing him later change into his suit, drinking tea, and then that shot that you just saw. But hours in the day. Hours in the day in terms of production hours. There's only so much we can do. And in the feature film, we will do a very compressed montage that really shows you that and stretches it out, like it appears here in the script, where it explains all the different little beats to really show that he's deeply contemplating everything that's to come later. The next beat we'll look at is the significance of the fine wedding china and what it represents, that he's preparing for his death and not for guests. This is an example of how things can change from the script to when you shoot, and then again in the edit, because I'll first show you the script. We pick up where he's gone to bed, what he intends to have been his last night before waking up again, and he's going to bed. We show him initially standing in front of the calendar, sees the date, and then you hear that his water has started to hiss. His kettle started to hiss because the water is boiling. Then he goes to the bedroom and retrieves the dishes and begins to set up the table. And then he goes into the kitchen again and does the tea ritual that we just saw. He throws away the instant coffee and does the tea ritual. But as we shot it, I started to rethink how we actually are going to show this, how it's going to play best on screen. And so I made some decisions on set that were also a reality of the time factor, and that I couldn't shoot the passage of time tea ritual, drinking tea throughout the day like I intended to, like I wanted to. So I figured out how I could work around my original intention as it's indicated in the script. So I'm going to play the sequence as it was actually delivered for you, and you can compare that to the script that you just saw and see if you think this, worked better than what I wrote in the first place. I kind of think it does, with that one exception, as I've stated several times, that I would like that extended reflective window. But it's already a long short film, and you have to make some cuts somewhere, and that's one of those cuts that was dictated by production reality, and I probably would have really significantly shortened it in the edit if I'd shot it how I intended in the first place. So we do start with David in front of the calendar, noting that today's the 18th. And the foreboding score starts back up, and we see him, of course, go to the bedroom and get this set of wedding dishes. And he takes his time to clear the table, and then we learn what's actually in the box. So that's the point that we enter the scene we looked at previously. And the point really of the fine china is, again, showing that he's preparing for this final meal. This is a ritualized goodbye. It's not hospitality for an actual guest. So the next beat of the film is Lily's arrival, and that is a visual and emotional disruption for David in the very best way in his case. And we will go into detail about all the Lily scenes in subsequent videos in parts 2 and 3 of this series. First, let's just take a look at how the script changed from what we shot and how the final edit plays out. So the first big change is actually a very short deleted scene, which is showing David at a buzzer inside his apartment and buzzing the person in and having a little dialogue telling them how to get in. The next shot is set in a hallway where Lily enters and the neighbor passes her in a hallway. But this was a really great opportunity to improve things, because once I realized from the location scout that Roger did and sent us video of, and I started thinking about this, and I didn't change it in the script because I figured I would need to get there physically to London and see this for myself, and then have my cinematographer Naeem with me, and that we would reconstruct this. And I had what in the end result, I think, is a much stronger beat. This is what we call one of those happy accidents, and I'm really glad it worked out the way it did. And I think the teaching moment for any aspiring filmmaker is to be open to such accidents. Really try to have the mentality of taking lemons and making lemonade, because I feel like this is a lot sweeter the way it worked out, and it gave me the opportunity to do this in a way that I feel is more indicative of what I really was trying to set up and convey. And it's cooler to me the way that it actually worked out in the final edit. In the script, the next shot is that Lily enters a hallway, and the neighbor with the bags, which was my little cameo, of course, passes by, and you notice it says in the script, he's carrying 2 big bags of trash. It's like kind of taking up the width of the hallway. Lily hustles to the stairs to let him pass, but the neighbor doesn't take notice of her. And then there's the knock at the door, and David opens it to reveal Lily and describes her. We cast for this person who is a bit ethnically ambiguous, but appearing to be a mix of Chinese and English. The way that the scene is shot, when David opens the door, I'm going to step through this frame by frame.
Oh, hi.
Hi, delivery for David?
He opens the door, and you don't really see Lily. You only see bags. You, of course, hear her voice, because that's what we have David hearing.
Yes, come in. One sec.
As he exits, we still really don't see Lily very clearly. We don't really have a clear read on her. And I thought about something. It occurred to me just the other day. And, it didn't occur to me when I shot it. So hindsight is 2020, and you never stop making the movie in your head, even once it's been released. But I had an opportunity to probably tighten this even slighter, in retrospect, if I had not let you see any of her face. You only see this tiny bit of her face as much as we see her until she's motivated inward by the neighbor passing. And so there's me and my little cameo. And in the script, again, this moment took place beforehand, but I think it's actually much stronger now to motivate her to enter the apartment. So looking at the script, you can see that the blocking of the action of how the bags were delivered and whatnot, and the dialogue was delivered, when things were delivered, that changed on the day that we actually were setting the shot up and rehearsing. And we, of course, shot this master shot where we see both of them, and then we shot the coverage, the closer angles on each of them. But I really like how this worked out. When we make the feature film, I've said before that we will most likely shoot David's apartment as a set on the soundstage so that we have the ability to build it to our specs and to be able to move the camera around and remove a set wall to get over here and shoot this way, because there are things in the script that just weren't practical in the reality, because there's only so wide that a lens will go and only so far back you can move the camera to get the shots as good as we could given the lenses and the physicality of the room. We made the choices we made. In the script, I have him setting the bags beside the place settings right next to the strawberry tart, which turned into a cake because they didn't have a strawberry tart. That's just one of my favorites, and that's what I wanted to use. And then Lily leaned into the doorway and looked around, wondering who's going to eat all this food. Eases into the kitchen to wait, because again, the idea that I had of the location itself in the abstract was that the kitchen opens into the dining, the little dining area is kind of part of the kitchen, and that the doorway opens to the kitchen, and then there's the living room, which is all one open room, and then there's the table. So, we shot it the way we shot it to out of necessity. So although the location dictated some changes, that opportunity to rethink it helped me improve the way certain things were delivered. And then the blocking when we were rehearsing the day we're shooting, led to further changes. But ultimately, the Lily arriving in the door and the neighbor being oblivious to her, I would like to think that somebody wouldn't be that rude to not acknowledge the person and blow vape smoke, at them. And of course, there are people who do that. I don't live in, I don't live in fantasy land, but you would at least clock that somebody's in your way, even if he scowled at her. But the idea is that he doesn't see her. She's not actually really there to him. And note that I didn't write it that way in the script, in part because I wanted to see how the reveal landed to the actors who were going to play the parts. I didn't want to tell them exactly what happened as they were reading through the script the very first time. Of course, once they read it, then they got the whole thing. As a filmmaker, my goal with this, in terms of the movement, the framing, the blocking, and the editing of the sequence, was to start to kind of quietly destabilize David's plan, and the reality he'd been in was to disrupt it, but to ease into that and do it in sort of a gentle way and not smack you or him over the head. The last story beat we'll look at in this section is the coffee retrieval from the trash. So after Lily leaves, the scene with the instant coffee retrieval is shot and edited pretty much exactly as written.
Well, if I ever see you again, I'll be glad to practice with you.
Well, I hope you call again and that you enjoy your food.
I will. Good night, Lily.
Good night.
We see the clean dishes and chopsticks. And we're going to hold on this for just a moment. So although that's a really short scene, it's very significant because it tells us, even unconsciously for some people, that for David, there is going to be a tomorrow. So that's part one of the Script to Screen series, looking at the visual language of the Unwinding. And hopefully what you take away from it is that you can really tell a lot of story without a lot of dialogue sometimes. In part two, we're going to focus on the illusion, how we constructed the reality of David and Lily, how that relationship is staged, and how the film invites you to accept it in different ways before asking you to question it. After this 3-part series, I'll start sharing videos about the development of the feature film version of The Unwinding. These script-to-screen videos are very much a part of that process, and they're the same materials and ideas that I'll be sharing with people when I take this out into the world and start talking to people about helping to set up the movie. I really look forward to reading your comments. If you have any questions about any aspect of this, anything we talked about here, the writing, directing choices, the visual storytelling, or film craft in general, feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer really thoughtfully. Just please do keep in mind that this conversation is part of the larger ongoing process, and there are people beyond you who have discovered the film on YouTube who may be reading along, including people who could help to finance this film or just care about the future of the project. So constructive, engaged discussion, as always, the most welcome. And if you'd like to support this overall project directly, I am wearing one of our Unwinding crew shirts, and you could get your very own or something similar, a hat or tote bag or coffee mug, via our little shop we have linked below here in the video. So check that out if you want to. Thank you again for watching and engaging so thoughtfully with this film and giving it a second life, because that really does help to push the feature film that much closer to reality. See you next time.